This is an interview with Mrs. Helen George Heath of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. Today is April 15, 1998, and we're presently at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Mrs. Heath, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit and talk with me today about growing up in Birmingham, as well as the Civil Rights Movement. Welcome to the Institute.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'd just like to know, were you born in Birmingham?
I was born in Birmingham.
In Birmingham. Where were your parents from?
My mother was from Perry County, Marion, Alabama.
Okay.
My father was from Uniontown down in Marengo County.
Okay.
So they were very closely allied, but they did not know one another until they were both adults and both of them were in Birmingham.
Oh, okay. So they came to Birmingham, and that's where
they met.
They met.
Mm-hmm.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
Unfortunately, no brothers, no sisters.
Okay.
I'm the only child. Fortunately.
Oh, okay. So you were only child.
Yes.
Were you spoiled?
Not really. I was a father's child, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit more, I think I bonded with him possibly before I really bonded with my mother. That's queer to say, isn't it? After I stayed there 9 months.
Yeah, well, actually, I think that's what happened with Florida now. And the reason that happened with us is because, I was in graduate school at the time, and Barbara was working. So she would go off to work, and I would be there with the children.
Mhm.
So that sort of is the way that we bonded. And it's rather interesting when that happens.
Well,
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
Timbersville. I was born in Timbersville. As a matter of fact, my father was pastor at South Hillerton Baptist Church at that time.
Oh, okay.
And I was born when he was pastoring there. And then after, I think I was about 3 months old, he moved across the little ditch. That was a little ditch there. Mm-hmm. They crossed there, and they bought a house on the corner of Avenue A, which is now First Avenue,
Right.
and Center Street.
Oh, okay.
So I was born right there.
Oh, so you were right there in the heart. We live just a few blocks from there.
I was born in a house that the Gollingtons owned on the corner of Gorilla Street and Avenue A.
Ah, okay. Now, Darlington, tell me a little about.
The Gollingtons were contractors.
Okay.
They did a lot of building at that time. They were quite well known in Timbersville.
Were they black contractors?
But,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Did they build a lot of the houses
I think
in
so.
that area?
I think so.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to interview Mr. Gilliard.
Yeah, Leroy.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And he talks about the construction industry
Right.
and his father as well.
Right. Well, the Gollingtons they may have interned with Rayfield.
Right. Oh, okay.
They were, because Rayfield lived on the corner of First Street and Avenue A.
Well, tell me, what kind of community was Timbersville, the neighborhood that you grew up in?
Residential, possibly some of the well-known people in Birmingham who lived in that community lived right in the neighborhood where I was born. Mm-hmm. You may run into the name of the Ensleys, mm-hmm. and then the Chisholms, and the Pattersons. The Pattersons, one of the sisters was married to William Henry, who was a music teacher at Parker High School. And of course, I just said the Rayfield, we all live. The Simmons, those were people who lived right in that community. The Parnells, and Albert Parnell was married to, boy, now I won't call her name. She was an Oscar at that time. But this was the residential community. The Lawsons lived in that community. They owned a grocery store that was on that street.
The Lawsons of the Lawson State?
No,
Lawsons,
no, not that Lawson. But do you know Timbersville?
Yes,
Okay, you know, going east on Avenue A, as you come around that curve, there's a building that was once a grocery store
right, that's right.
by the
Yes.
Lawsons.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, they recently renovated.
I think they do a beauty shop or something.
Oh, okay. Was the neighborhood or the area economically diverse?
I should think so.
Yeah. What kind of people, what kind of occupations?
Well, I just said these people who own the grocery stores. There were, the Simmons were, I don't know what the profession of the older people, but the younger ones there were teachers in Birmingham Public School System. The Patterson that I mentioned, one married to William Henry, she was a teacher. The Ansleys, a very brilliant family. There were loads of them, all of them were educators. The Chisholms were, and I don't know what the Chisholms did. But
Were there any just common working folk like, you know, the plants?
Right, well, I can imagine,
Mail
carriers. I
carriers?
believe now the Insleys had a lot of mail carriers.
Okay.
And there were a lot of people in there who were plant people.
Right.
But I moved away from Timbersville when I was very early teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get to know anything but the children, never knew about what the parents did.
Right. What about your mother and father's educational background?
My mother was a graduate of Lincoln Normal in Marion, Alabama. And you know what Lincoln Normal is associated with the congregational people. After she came to Birmingham, she went to Niles College. And she worked a while in the private sector. She did. At that time, the earlier times when they were doing, they didn't call them daycare, what did they call them? Kindergarten.
Yes, right, kindergarten.
Yeah. My father became a college student and a high school graduate after he married my mother, because when he expressed his desire to be a minister, my mother said, well, you can't be a minister unless you go to school.
Yeah.
So he went to Selma University in Selma, Alabama, and then he did some additional work in just here and there in where the colleges,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Baptist College
Oh, yeah, he did.
for ministerial purposes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Where did you start first grade?
Washington School.
Washington School.
Washington School.
Why do you say Washington School?
I loved it. I lived on Avenue A and it was on Avenue D. And being a minister's daughter, I had to run from Washington School every day to 219 Avenue A because I guess many people, a lot of years have always been a little bit, I wanted to say unkind, but I don't want to say unkind because they weren't unkind, but they just had no peek out at minister children.
Right.
So I had to run from school every day to 219.
Every day
in order to avoid the guys and the girls who were fighters, because I never had an opportunity to return a leg.
Were your teachers pet?
Not really, not really. I was talking to one of my teachers, my fourth grade teacher, and just this week. She is Maggie P. Harris. She taught at Washington School, and she did send me across the street to the store that was run by the Mobleys, and the Mobleys we called them then. I had to go get milk because at Washington School in that day you didn't have a lunchroom.
Okay. So then were you actively involved? How do you say you loved Washington? What was it about Washington that you adored?
Well, first thing I loved my earlier teachers, Mary E. Strong. You know that funeral home?
Yes, right.
Okay.
That's right.
And Mary Strong was one of my favorite teachers. That was Miss Burgess that I just loved. And there was an enemy Thompson. And they were, teachers were so dedicated that you just had love there.
Was Mrs. Strong that you referred to, was she related to the husband of Ruth Strong, of Dr. Ruth Strong? No, it wasn't the same.
This was the Undertaker.
Right.
Don Undertaker, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
How many years were you at Washington?
I completed 8th grade.
Through 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And where did you go after Washington?
I walked all the way to Industrial High School.
So you walked
across the railroad
across the track, all the way to Industrial.
That's right.
Could you have taken the bus?
No, there was no bus.
There was no bus there.
No, it was a streetcar.
Yeah.
But to walk all the way from Avenue A to, what is that, First Avenue where Illigan School is?
That's Tuscaloosa Avenue.
Tuscaloosa.
They're saying the Second Avenue.
Second Avenue. Well, to walk all the way to that spot, because that was the only spot that you had going that direction. Now, if you had gone the other direction, you would have gotten, they had chimneys then.
Right.
Because there was no bus.
Right.
But, so none of the children in Washington, in the Timbersville area, who drove to school. We all walked. And occasionally, when there was real bad weather, my father would take me to school, but I was never very happy about riding in the car because my classmates couldn't ride.
So by that time, then you were not running home every day. You were
I was a part of
part of the in crowd.
the in-crowd.
I can remember walking to school as well. And I remember leaving home, there would be 3 or 4 of us, and then we'd get a little bit further. And eventually it would just be, a whole crowd. And then coming back home, you would start with that big crowd. And it was really fun.
Didn't want to ride in the car. You wanted to ride in clement weather.
Mm-hmm.
I shan't forget the first year that I was at Industrial. My best friend was Ethel Bowman. You know the Bowmans,
Yes.
the Bowman store, the Bowman. She contracted pneumonia that turned into tuberculosis as a result of our walking in the weather, I can imagine.
Well, okay. As a child.
As a child, yes, she died at the end of our 9th grade year.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that, had an effect upon you and that entire class.
Yes.
Being an intimate part of the industrial high school, At one time it was termed the largest Negro high school in the world. How was that transition from Washington to industrial?
I don't think it had any great impact on us because that was the only thing that we knew.
And you look forward
We
to
looked forward to going there because that was the school and you just looked forward.
Did you like industrial as well as you did Washington?
I think I did.
Were you involved in extracurricular activities?
No, not too many. The YTs. I was laughing about that the other day. I wanted to be a part of the choir, but my mother says when school is out, you know the way home.
That's right. I've heard that one, yes.
Yeah, so you had to go home. You didn't get a chance to fraternize with them. Not having any brothers and sisters, that's where I kind of miss having some siblings
Right,
with whom you could associate.
right. Now, Birmingham, of course, in those days, in the 40s and 50s.
And the 30s.
And the 30s.
Please go back.
Was looked upon as one of the most segregated cities in the world. How did that impact upon you as a young Black child growing up in a city such as this?
Well, to really begin with, I thought that that was just the way things were supposed to be. I did not know the difference. You know, you're poor and you don't know it. Well, I didn't know that I was segregated. However, when you walked, if ever I had to walk from my home over to Tuscaloosa and pass Illerton School,
Which was a white school.
you just always said, that's the big white folks school. And, well, you just, at that time, you just didn't realize. It was only when I got a little older that I recognized it back there. I was not really a part of the city.
Right. Did you ever have any encounters with the system?
Never had any encounters. I do remember, and of course I didn't know that until after I started teaching, at that spot on Tuscaloosa Avenue, which is now, I think I saw they had put a beauty shop in there. It's diagonal.
Right on the, diagonal across from the school.
From the school.
Yes.
That was a drugstore. And my teacher that I was just talking about at Washington School was telling me years ago that she and another teacher went in there. They too had to walk from Washington to Smithfield where they lived. And
The teachers walked to school?
yes, because it was inconvenient. You didn't have any, you would have to get off on Tuscaloosa to go anyway.
You only had 3 or 4 blocks to walk.
Well,
To go across.
no, remember how far that was, around that curving road. Okay,
That's right, yeah. I mean, after Tuscaloosa.
well, then you have to walk around that to the railroad track.
Right, yeah.
And then from the railroad track, you would have to walk 4 blocks,
4 blocks, right.
right?
Mhm.
So it was a pretty
It was a
good
nice
haul.
walk, yeah.
Yes,
Maybe that's why we were in more better shape then. Yeah.
that's the truth.
Mhm.
That's really the truth.
Mhm.
But she was telling me the other day, not the other day, she told me years ago that she and another teacher, and I don't remember the other teacher's name, I guess that was before my time, they went into that drugstore and they ordered some ice cream. And you remember the little table that people used to sit at?
Right.
Well, this other teacher, a very light-skinned person, sat down and ate her ice cream. And my teacher told me that she was fired as a result of it.
the teacher was fired as a result of sitting at the table. Is that right? That's interesting.
So you could buy the ice cream,
Right.
but you were supposed to, what is it, walk out.
Yeah, now see, that's the first time I've heard a story like that where a person, a teacher,
Mhm.
went in and actually sat down. I'm wondering, how did, what was the process? How did they determine that, her name, evidently probably knew her.
Well,
They may have stopped in.
they knew that these were teachers
Mhm,
because they had their books, I can imagine.
mhm.
And she always has told me that story.
Is that right? That's interesting. That's funny. Do you know what the teacher's name?
My teacher's name was Maggie Harris, but I don't know that
Yeah.
teacher's name.
Right.
She would be willing to tell you, I'm sure, because she is very alert.
Right. Okay. How old is she? Maybe.
She's gotta be 90.
Mhm.
She's gotta be, but she's very alert. I
Okay.
shop for her almost once a week.
Is that right? Okay. Let me get in touch with her. We'll talk about that. What do you remember about Industrial High School that made it so special?
I guess by that time I had become a teacher's pet. And all of my teachers were pretty unusually nice to me, I think. I did a lot of chores for them, like going from one classroom to the other with a little note, delivering a message. I was dependable and I had a voice that was utilized almost from the time I got to Parkland. And I always was able to speak on the stage.
Yeah.
And that was special.
Mm-hmm.
So to really get a chance to do that.
Right. That's interesting because I've interviewed a number of people who talked about, those kinds of activities. Also, several have raised the question of color.
Well, I was about to go to that point.
Okay.
And it was unusual for me to get a chance to do that because of my color. But my being able to do that, I think, came because everybody said, you know who her father is, don't you?
Okay.
Even when I started teaching, I was confronted with, and just who are you? And when I gave the name of Charles Henry George, then was a minister up at SARS.
So it was important that who you were. It was very, very important.
Isn't that strange?
That's the whole concept of race on one hand and class on the other hand is important in the whole scenario of Birmingham, I think. What did you do after graduating?
After graduating from Parkland, I went to Alabama over the protest with my parents.
Where did they want you to go?
My father wanted me to go to Spelman because there were no men at Spelman.
Mm.
He didn't know that Morehouse was across the street. My mother wanted me to go to Talladega because we did have a relative who lived nearby, and her husband was an employee of the college, not on the college level, I think, in a janitorial capacity. So, but I insisted that it had to be Alabama State because one of my favorite teachers played it in the band at the Alabama State, and he always talked about the Alabama State Collegian.
Mhm.
So I went to Alabama State, and unfortunately, at the end of 3 months, I wanted to leave Alabama State.
Did you?
No, my parents were they gave me a choice. I made the choice. So you have to live with your choice, or you may come home and get a job.
Mhm.
I don't know whether they really meant that, but my mother says, oh, well, fine, if you want to come home, we will be happy to have you. But you cannot go to another college at this time.
And you believed that, so you.
Oh,
so you
I knew
remained-
that.
Yeah.
No, there was no getting out of that.
Mm.
It was your choice. We let you do what you wanted to do. Parents were really, they were very positive about that.
Right. We talked about the color cast here, at Parker and Industrial, or in fact, probably around the city. Did you see the same kind of situation when you went to Alabama State?
Not really. No.
Could you relate any instances that would highlight that situation when you were at Industrial? Or was it just something that was
Well,
accepted as the norm?
I was very much aware of this during the entire time I was at Industrial.
Mhm.
And I do know that,
Why were you so aware?
well, because other than the persons who had the little long hair and had family background, you were not utilized for anything else.
Mhm.
And I do know that I was very upset when the principal, H. Parker, did not know me from any other student, in spite of the fact that I had spoken on the stage every week. He just did not know me. I had a cousin who was in the school at the time that I didn't know that she was my cousin, but she was much lighter and she was utilized very frequently. And it just happened that they utilized the teachers' children, light children. And when it was time for graduation, I even got a part on the class day program,
Mhm.
which was unusual for a black girl, dark skin.
Right. That's, and that's very interesting and all of us knew, even when I was coming through school, it was similar. But in many cases, we shy away from discussing that issue. But I think it's a very significant issue, and I think it had an impact for a lot of children during that time.
I don't know whether I'm getting ahead of the story, but when I became a teacher at Parker, I think I was so aware of this that I made a very strong effort to be sure that all children were included.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, I'm now going to work with a 1948 class reunion, because the youngsters fell in love with me because I was concerned about that particular problem, and I made my contribution to them as a result of the thing that had happened to me.
So you made a conscious effort
Conscious effort.
to make a change in that regard.
I really
How
did.
successful were you?
Tremendously successful.
Were there any obstacles in your attempting to change that whole concept within the school itself?
At first, teachers were, why do you want to bring that child in at first, but later, no.
And over time, I'm sure other teachers then started.
Right. But I do know the time when Althea Montgomery, Althea Palmer Montgomery, I do know that they did confront us sometimes about little things that we would do where we included all of the children. I talked with a young lady this morning from California. She said, that was your forte. Yeah, I really made a conscious effort, very conscious effort, not to exclude the handicap. And of course, you do know that our classes were not, we had all of the, we taught all of the children.
Everybody was in the class, right?
Everybody. 55 of them,
55.
to be perfectly frank.
Let me back up just a bit.
Okay.
You said after 3 months of being at Alabama State, you wanted to come home. When did you become comfortable at Alabama State?
Well, I really didn't become comfortable that year because I made practically all C's because I was very upset. And I did not meld with the other children too much. I was a little selfish. I kind of was a little standoffish. And however, when sororities came on the campus, then I wanted to be a part. And for the first year and a half, I didn't do very well because, I did very well academically. My grades were accelerated. That really motivated me because I had to have B average in that day to get in. So that's when I really became comfortable and did better and made a lot of friends.
What's the sorority?
I'm Delta.
Why Delta?
Oh, well, I liked the academic record that they had. And see, I had to really work with that thing in order to get my grades up, in order to get into the sorority, because I had to have B average. I was very impressed with that.
Well, that was the attraction.
And then people that were friends of mine in Birmingham were devils. I did not find out until later that some of my favorite teachers were AKAs, but I still prefer Deltas. Okay. Because there were a lot of my teachers who were Deltas also. But in that day, and I guess I followed that line of reasoning, I never confronted a child and say you got to go in this sorority or that sorority, and I always stayed.
So you, your major was education,
Education.
and after you finished at Alabama State, what did you do?
Came to Birmingham, got a job out at Dunbar High School. And of course,
Blue buildings, right?
yeah, of course, I was unhappy out there because they paid $60 a month. And you don't know about that. But when I got the job out there, the principal was J.T. Gaines. Have you heard that name before?
No.
Mr. Gaines was quite an inspiration to me, but he let me know from the beginning that I was a little bit younger than I should have been because I did, leaving Washington School and coming to Parker's High Industrial. I didn't tell you that I had a couple of skips, so I was a little ahead of myself. So the principal became a mentor, and he said that you got to wear your dresses a little bit longer. But I stayed out there for years I, laughed about myself at that time. I walked off of that job.
You did why?
I walked off,
Why did you start working?
you know, because my friends were in Birmingham and they were making $101. And I now regret, and I can always relate that particular incident to children, and I understand when they make very poor decisions. But here again, my parents had an opportunity to say, it's your choice. Because when school opened in September, I didn't have a job.
So did you walk off in the middle of the
No,
school year?
no, I stayed till the end of the year.
Okay.
But I didn't
You decided
resign.
Okay.
I decided not to return.
I see.
And I could always say to children, now you've got to think about what you're doing. You know, you've got a road to go. You got to decide which one you're going to, you know.
Yes.
But I walked off of, I said I walked off because I did not resign. And that is something that haunts me even today.
What did you do when you fought?
Well, my father was pastor of his Sardis, and of course they told me, you know, I didn't have a job, but you need to find your job quickly. Somehow, I was called to Oman High School to substitute. I substituted 3 weeks. And Mr. Goen, he was Mr. Goen, came to Oman, and George Bell brought him around to my room to let him know that I had been a good substitute teacher. However, I was accused of sitting on the desk.
And who was Mr. Goin?
Mr. Goen was a white assistant superintendent. And he told me that there was a job open at Parker High School. And they would like to have me to consider taking that job. I staged an objection at that time because it was in mathematics.
Okay, position.
Yeah. My major was not mathematics. I had social studies, English combination. And he said to me, but your grades on your record and transcript, they indicate that you are able to teach algebra. Unfortunately, again, I like that word, I had skipped algebra at industrial. And here they were asking me to teach algebra. Although my college algebra grades were good. But I worked at my college algebra grades and I was able to keep up with the class. But fundamentally,
And I can relate to that, particularly.
you know where I am.
Particularly about algebra,
Uh-huh.
because my high school algebra teacher had a contest, and I was a good student, you know, with baby, because I didn't get accelerated class. But he told us anyone that sold X number of ads could get an A out of class. So I sold ads. So I didn't learn the fundamentals of algebra.
Right.
Although I could pass and I could.
Right.
But when I got to college, that's when it really, you know, and I told him about that. I told his wife about it too. She said, "You can't what?" But yeah, I can really relate to not having that foundation.
Have a foundation.
So what did you do? Did you take the job?
Well, he brought a book. And that book was General Mathematics. And I was gonna have this job at Parker Annex to teach general mathematics.
Math grade.
But before I got there, Mr. Henry, who was the music teacher, was called to service in there. And he was leaving. So Mary Alice Stolenworth. Do you know that name?
I know stonework.
Okay. Stolenworth took the music job, which left the algebra job open at the main building.
Mm.
I got the algebra job.
Mm.
Okay. Very uncomfortable. Fortunately, W.B. Johnson, who was a great mathematician, was teaching a class in mathematics to adults because they were trying to replace some of the men who were going away, and I took that class with him. So every day I was a page ahead of my students.
Mm.
And I have found a number of students who said you were a great algebra teacher. And it's always funny to me because they didn't know that I was just a page
You are
ahead.
learning right along with them. Yeah, that's interesting. At what point would you become really cognizant of the civil rights struggles here in Birmingham?
At what point?
And personally, personal contact with
My father again. As soon as we were encountered with our being unequal and this Rosa Parks incident came up, and my father was very much in tune with what was going on because he was quite cognizant of the world around him. And he was very concerned about his community and what was going to transpire there. So that's when I really became very much aware. However, I was teaching by this time,
Right.
So teachers in Birmingham didn't get into civil rights saying if they wanted to maintain their jobs, and I was teaching at Park, and I didn't want to leave that.
What year did you go to Parker?
I went to Park in 43.
Your father was well known, of course, in the city at the time.
Right.
There was really not a movement
That was not a movement thing.
that particular
That
time.
movement didn't occur until,
Mid-50s.
right,
Was he involved in voter registration?
yes, it was.
Okay. Were you a voter?
Yes, I started voting, that's an interesting story. When I went to Parker to work, the issue came up that teachers ought to vote. And surely I knew that I needed to vote. So I went down to the city hall, and my interviewers were white, naturally. I did not know until later years that the person who was interviewing me ran a store on 11th Avenue North. That's right in, you can't get to that point now because of the freeway came through that. But I completed my papers and he asked me to come in and talk with him, and he gave me a paragraph to read. I read the sound and the voice, tones, and whatever, but I did not concentrate on what I was reading.
It sounded good.
Sounds good. And he looked at the other white man and he said, hey, he says, tell me what you read. And of course I looked down and I saw that I had just read a part of the Constitution. So I could articulate that well, but when I finished, he looked at the other white man and said, what did she say? He said, how? He said, say it again. And so then I did articulate it.
Right.
I put it together. And of course, I was tickled because when they got ready to give me my score, they had the wrong application in front of me. They had Vera Johnson's application. And I said, no, that's not, but that was,
So you passed the first time?
I passed the first time.
Mm.
Because I said something that they didn't even know what I was saying.
Right.
I passed the very first time.
Was
Now, I was very aware about this time of what was happening to us.
Did you go down alone that day, or
No,
were there
two of us went together.
Did both
Two
pass?
teachers from Parker.
Mhm.
I think she passed that day, but I know I didn't.
So you didn't get the question how many bubbles in a bar of soap?
No, they just asked me to tell them what I had read,
Mhm.
and that was the definition of the Constitution.
Now, had you done any preparation? Were there any classes of any sort for voter registration?
None at all.
Mhm.
We just went down.
Right. As a high school teacher, were you still teaching at Parker
Yes.
when
I
the
taught
movement started?
it. Yes. No.
Okay.
By that time, I had gone to Hayes as a counselor.
Oh, I see.
I had been back to graduate school.
Right.
And
Where did you go to graduate school?
University of, well, I started at Atlanta University, where I really learned to be a student, if you know Atlanta University. And after the first year at Atlanta University, I went to University of Michigan. And 4 summers later, I was able to have a master's degree in guidance and counseling.
So in summer, you would go off to Michigan. Did you ever think of going to Alabama?
Yes, I tried.
What's-
Not really tried, but I was away. But nobody had been to the University of Alabama. I had wanted to go, should I say.
Did you make application?
No. I tried to get that, but I'm chicken. And so I didn't push it.
Right.
But I did try to get reimbursed,
Right.
and I didn't. I didn't stop them there. But I didn't get any help back.
You made the attempt to be reimbursed for tuition.
Right.
Were you successful?
No, they said that they taught that in Alabama. And that's what I said, I'm a little chicken, and I didn't push it, because I should have. You know, you think back and you said you should have done something back. So they just said no, and so I said, well, I will just go on and pay my way to University of Michigan.
There were, of course, some that received monies from the state
I didn't receive
because they were supposedly the courses were not offered at Tuscaloosa. Or in some cases they were offered, but because they were black, they were not allowed to come, so therefore they would get
But I'm sure that that's what they were saying to me, that was taught at the University of Alabama. But I did not pursue that particular thing, so I just didn't ever get it.
As a teacher in the Birmingham school system during the movement, what was that like?
Interesting. I extended my sympathy to the children. I turned my back a lot of times. And I allowed myself to be used
In what way?
by students. I shan't forget the day that 3 young men came to my office pretending to be interested in reading the college catalog. And they sat, we talked, got our books, and showed them. And then they said, we need to run right over here a few minutes. we're gonna leave the office, and because I don't remember the exact words, but they were able to get out of my office. An hour or so later, they came back and laughed.
They had been involved. with
They went to Woodlawn High School.
What year was this?
This was, what year was Kid?
68.
Okay, this was 68.
Oh, okay.
They went to Woodlawn High School, let the flag have mast.
Oh, is that right? They came back and told you what
They came back and laughed about it,
Mhm.
and laughed that they had propped up some little, they had that, we got to go right around here, you know how children can.
Sure.
And because they used the council that time,
Mhm.
so I let them go, whatever they told me, and I don't remember, I've laughed with those youngsters, one of the youngsters, particular Copeland, I've laughed with him since about it. He said, we got out there, didn't we?
Did you ever participate in any of the mass meetings?
Yes, I've gone to several mass meetings.
How would you describe a mass meeting?
Very moving. Really, you really wanted to be actively involved in it. But here again, you're chicken.
What did your father say? I know he was actively involved. Did he counsel you at all in terms of?
Yeah, I was, and everything that I did was right with my parents. Believe it or not. But he would say, well, daughter, you got to give me some money to, you know, so I supported it financially with him. Because he did not miss a single meeting. He was always there. And my mother really wanted to know, were we going to be able to live after the movement, because he was so devoted, and he did financially support it so all the way.
Now, did you say your mother taught?
Yes, she was.
She was retired by then?
Oh, but she didn't retire. She just worked for 4 or 5 years, and when I was, she worked. She didn't work when I was first born. She worked about 5 or 6 years later, and then she became a full house.
Was she involved with the movement?
No. By this time, we were no longer at Stallings, and we had moved to 11th Avenue. And 11th Avenue was, we were 2 blocks north and 1 block south from where Chose lived.
Oh, okay. So you were right in the area.
Right in the area.
Down in my hill.
Right in down in my hill. And the FBI was very much present at our house often. Because whenever anything occurred, they would find their way to our house. Particularly, do I remember the time that the men were shot on Center Street after they had bombed up in that area. And my father was going to the National Convention that year, but they came to our house weekly to find out, were you involved in the shooting?
This was 2 white men.
Yeah.
Who were shot after they had bombed. Was that what it shows on?
Right, I think it was the DeAmper's house too.
And then the FBI.
Continually came to our house to find out what was my father's involvement in, because I think his name possibly was called often whenever they were young.
He also was very closely associated, I assume, with Reverend Shuttlesworth. When
Very much.
Reverend Shuttlesworth, church and homes bombed.
Now, when that occurred, like they're doing at this tornado thing, my father went out, and when he went out there, the FBI walked in, and immediately they spotted his shrine pen. And he said that they dropped their eyes, and then they softened their approach to them. They were not as harsh as they had come in to be. But
That pen really meant something to
meant
them
something to them.
as a result, and he was not harassed in
No.
any way
No.
after that.
No.
Do you remember the Sunday that the 16th Street Church was bombed?
Oh, yes.
What do you remember about it?
I remember hearing the sound and wondering what in the world could that be. By this time, my father was pastor out at regular missionary in East Birmingham. And of course, I think it was late of that afternoon because, you know, we were going to church and we were going in the opposite direction. So we we just heard the sound but didn't have any idea that it was going to be so closely associated. We were not going to be so closely associated. But see, one of the girls that was killed lived 1 block from the West's.
Yes.
They were 1 block west of where we lived. And see, when we came in, we were all very devastated over this. And then 2 blocks east of us was Alpha Blitz. I did not know the Collins. And of course, the McNairs, it didn't touch you nearly as much as the West's and the Blocks. Yeah.
How active was your father, after, let's say, 63? In 64, you had the Civil Rights Bill was passed, 65, you had the marches and settlement. Was he involved in that at all?
The March from Selma,
Yes.
we walked at Pettus Bridge and we begged him not to. Because by this time, he's an old man. You know. But he said, do or die. And he did.
Was he there on Bloody Sunday? The day that they were attacked by the state troopers? Did he
No.
march? He marched the next.
He marched the next time. No, he was not.
And you all counseled him not to.
We begged him. And when he came in, he was a tired person. But by this time, we had insisted that he would not drive, so he did have a driver to drive him down. But he walked the bridge.
You've been very, very helpful. I mean, you've been a classic teacher today. You taught an awful lot. And I appreciate that. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I don't think so.
Okay. You've been very helpful. I certainly appreciate your time.
You get teachers talking, they don't ever stop.
That's right. And I guess that's why we become such good students, because we have such good teachers. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate your asking.